All right, welcome in to the Powers on Sports and Florida Football Insiders podcast simulcast interview. We got a great pleasure this week. We're going to be talking to a preeminent source of college information around the country, College Football Insider from the Action Network, one Brett McMurphy. Brett is based here in the Tampa Bay area in my neck of the woods, and Brett is the, again, preeminent insider on the world of college football. So welcome in, Brett.
Hey, good to talk to you, Jason. Thanks, buddy.
You got it. I know it's been last week was a week when we all thought it was going to be kind of a lackluster week, and it turned out to be a pretty good week of college football. We had a lot of games that we thought were going to be mismatches that turned out to be really good games. We had Florida State pushed, we had Alabama pushed, Texas was pushed, Georgia was pushed. So just give me a thought about last week's slate there, and your thoughts of, again, the games we thought weren't going to be very good games turned out to be some pretty good football.
Yeah, usually it seems like when we have a bad schedule, everyone kind of poo-poos it, and then, 24 hours later, you look back and say, wow, we had some really good games. I think that's another example. I think one thing with maybe the transfer portal and people being able to revamp the roster so quickly, these games where teams are supposedly huge, prohibitive favorites, if they don't show up, they could be in danger. And certainly saw a number of examples of that, around the country. So, again, we only have, 14, 15 weeks of this stuff. So I really never think there's a bad week anyway.
Do you think it's a sign that there's not a dominant? I mean, I think the prevailing thought has maybe been the last week or so, maybe there's not a dominant team. We all think Georgia and Texas are really good, but maybe not dominant kind of good. Is that your sense of 3 weeks of action, that there maybe isn't a handful of teams that are going to be dominant this year?
What's funny, I actually think probably Georgia Georgia obviously is the favorite to win it. I don't have them ranked number one on my AP ballot right now because my ballot is a snapshot of what has happened through the season. It's not how I project them out the entire year. We don't know anything about Georgia. They haven't played anybody. I mean, South Carolina tested them a little bit. The second half, they look like potentially the best team in the country. The first half, they look like a top 20 team. And there's about 40 teams that look like top 20 team. So, yeah, I think the people that are tired of the Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson playoff every year, I think you're going to have a little different variants this year in the playoff. So that makes it exciting. Clemson's, cliche time, backs are against the wall this week against Florida State. This is an elimination game for Clemson. Are they out? Alabama has to win out, or they're out of the playoff. So, I kind of agree a little bit with you that I think it's more wide open. At least it appears like right now. But at the end of the day, we still may end up with 2 or 3 of the same usual suspects, including, Michigan and those guys.
You mentioned the Alabama game. I was at the Alabama USF game Saturday here in Tampa. Obviously, we saw the score, and if you're people around the country, ended up 17-3, and USF was very much in that game, very late into that game. Just give me a sense in what you're hearing over the weekend about the Alabama quarterback situation, and nobody they went to looked very good in that game, and the offensive line was a really, really much of a problem, especially in pass protection. What sense are you getting about the Alabama quarterback situation?
Yeah, that was a weird deal. It was almost like, Saban knew that they were, they should win the game. They were nearly 5 touchdown favorites. Nothing against USF, and so because of that, they're like, okay, we're not going to play Milroe.
Yeah,
we're going to see what we have with these other 2 guys. And then, we've got Ole Miss this week and the rest of the SEC schedule. And so I think basically that was the plan. And so now we'll have to see, he said after the game, he's going to evaluate all the quarterbacks now going forward with Ole Miss. USF put up a great fight. They took Bama a lot deeper into this game than I'm sure Saban ever imagined. And now people are wondering about is the dominance of Alabama over? At least in the short term, people think that the line for the Ole Miss Alabama game opened up, I think, around 7 or 8. Last I saw on Monday, I think it's down to 6.
Right.
So we'll have to see. But the one thing that's been constant every year in Saban's 17 years is once you start doubting Alabama, that's usually when you're in trouble. So, but this will be the ultimate test because they do look a lot more. Let's say they look a lot more mortal than they have in past years.
No, I mean the defense was still really good, but man, the offensive, whether it's play calling, creativity, lack of skill guys. But I'm with you. I think Milroe's got to be the guy they go back to because I just didn't see anything out of Simpson and Buckner that made you think in a big spot in a big moment that they could deliver in the passing game. And at least Milroe run athletically was good enough, and he could throw a decent deep ball and stuff. I didn't see anything out of Buckner and Simpson to show me that they could be the guy moving forward. So I do think Milroe will be the guy moving forward. And you're right. It was very surprising that he didn't get any touches or any action in that game on Saturday. So give me a thought on the Deion phenomenon out west. Obviously, Colorado wins a thriller Saturday night in double overtime against Colorado State. It was a very entertaining game. If you didn't see that at the end of that game, Travis Hunter gets injured. Their two-way dual star cornerback wide receiver. He sounds like he's going to be out for a period of weeks, multiple games. Obviously, Colorado has at Oregon and USC coming up in the next couple of weeks. Just give me the scuttlebutt that you hear behind the scenes from coaches around the country about the impact of Deion out west at Colorado.
Yeah, I mean it's been remarkable. I mean, this is a team that Vegas projected their win total was 3.5. They need one more win to go over that number. So they've done a remarkable job. I watched all of Saturday's game with pretty much most of America. Colorado State blew it. They had the game.
Yes.
I'm sure, I know Jay Norvell. I haven't reached out to him yet. I probably will later this week. I talked to him a little bit before the game, leading up to the game. And if I could give him free serum, and I may not even need to, I think, late in the game when they had that 4th and 2, he probably would have went for it instead of punting. They had a great punt. They pinned him on the 2. But, with the clock stopping and all that, that's irrelevant these days. First down would have ended it. And the other thing I would have asked him is, would you have gone for 2 in that first overtime?
Yes.
Colorado scored, go up 7. They scored. Because every touchdown after that, you got to go for 2. So why not use your best 2-point play right now and see what happens? Obviously, it's easy to do that, but yeah, Colorado State outgained Colorado. They gave them a lot of problems. There are obviously a billion penalties, but as far as Colorado, they've done outstanding. I hate to be the wet blanket, but I'm just if it's raining, I tell you if it's raining. I'm not gonna tell you the sun's out. So as great as Colorado is, what has blown me away is you see all these various reports that there's more money on Colorado to win the national title than any other school. There's more money on Hunter and Sanders to win the Heisman than any other player. Look, Jason, if you'll give him my address, I will book every one of those bets. Because I know Colorado is an unbelievable story, but they're not going to win the national championship, and those guys won't win the Heisman. And it's nothing against those guys, but that's just the reality. I mean, they're sitting here at 3-0, and you look at the rest of their schedule, they will be favored in maybe 1 or 2 of their games.
Right.
So they potentially could go 4-8. They could go 3-9. They could go 5-7. We don't know. I've got them currently in my bowl projections. Maybe they get to 6. I don't know if they can get to 6. But again, that's just the long-term outlook of Colorado. But certainly, Deion's done a remarkable job there. He has turned things around. He's made history. They've never had Fox's Big Noon Kickoff go to consecutive sites. I thought they were just going to start having their mail delivered there. They're there so much. Game days there for a game against a G5 school, which they never do in the past or rarely do. So, we have to see what happens going forward. And, for for USF fans, it's probably got to be a bitter pill because,
Right.
he interviewed with USF and was in the mix there, but ultimately, from what I was told, basically, he used USF to get a bigger deal at Colorado. But my gosh, if Colorado never would have entered the picture
Right.
and he would have ended up at USF, just think. And this is not a shot at Alex by any means, but just the amount
Sure.
of attention that the USF program would be getting now.
Has Deion's philosophy of going into the portal and basically overhauling the entire roster, has that part of his start at Colorado trickled through the college football coaching world? Especially, you've heard some rumblings of why isn't Nick Saban and guys like Dabo Swinney utilize the transfer portal more? Has that philosophy, do you think, trickled through the coaching world a little bit more than you thought it might have?
Well, I mean, everybody pretty much except for Dabo, has been pretty aggressive in the transfer portal. Now, Deion took it to another level. Like he basically, scorched earth and got rid of, 80% of
Right.
his roster.
Right.
The other schools don't feel the need to do that. They don't feel like they're at such a disadvantage roster wise where they need to wipe out 3/4 of their team and bring in new players. But certainly, you're going to look around and teams are going to make additions through the portal where they need to. So I think maybe Texas State's another example. They almost cleared house with the new coach. They've seen a drastic improvement. So I think teams that are basically, I think it's probably more likely at the Group of Five level, or maybe it's some Power Fives that have been struggling for a number of years and need to just kind of hit the reset button. I think you'll see a Deion like transfer portal situation, but the big boys, the Alabamas, the Clemsons, etc. They're not gonna clear out 3/4 of the roster to bring in new guys. And you look at somebody that's done it very, very well at the Power Five level, who I have projected as one of my 4 playoff teams, is Florida State.
Yep.
I mean, Mike Norvell arguably has had the best offseason as far as the transfer portal with bringing, Keon Coleman at wide receiver and others. Um, he's made specific additions at specific positions where they were weak, and he has bolstered that roster. And again, we'll find out Saturday if they're legit or not. They certainly looked the part against LSU. So I think, Jason, you'll see it more on an individual basis than basically a, free for all, kind of like Deion did.
All right, we're on the Florida Football Insiders and Powers on Sports simulcast podcast. We're talking to Brett McMurphy, college football preeminent insider at the Action Network. You can find Brett on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days at Brett_McMurphy. He does awesome work on that platform as far as breaking information, rankings, insider stuff that he hears from all around the country. Let's stay in the state of Florida. Was Saturday a signature win for Billy Napier, or is it just maybe a sign that Tennessee's kind of a little bit not what we thought they potentially could be?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both. I mean, even with the past history success of Florida against Tennessee, they haven't won there since Tennessee hadn't won there since 2003. When it's funny, Napier was a grad assistant at Clemson, and Heupel was a grad assistant at Oklahoma. That's how long ago it was that Tennessee won in Gainesville. But no, I mean look, Tennessee's still a top 25, possibly top 20 team.
Right.
Once if Milton, this was the whole thing going into the season. If Milton could harness, that arm and be more accurate, Tennessee would be, legit contender in the SEC. And if not, then you're going to see kind of the results you saw against Florida, where he's getting hit and he's throwing up arm punts that are easy interceptions. But no, that was huge for Florida. I mean, Billy Napier's had an unbelievable stretch, not only at Florida but at Louisiana as an underdog. So, you guys are into those things. Next time Florida's an underdog, you may want to look at the Gators again. But that I don't want to say it's a must win, but that's not fair. But certainly that's significant enough for Florida. I think they're going to get to 6 wins. I think they're going to get to a bowl game. Maybe they can do a little bit more damage after this win because, as much as they did defensively against Tennessee, they also, with ETN, they also showed the ability to run the ball, control the ball. And I think that bodes well for the Gators long term.
Through 3 weeks, give me a couple of teams that are on your radar that maybe aren't on the national fans' radar that you really think maybe they're ranked between 10 and 25 or 15 to 25 or maybe unranked, that you really think, man, these are really good couple really good teams that if they get a couple breaks, they could make a run in there. Maybe a team out west in the Pac-12, maybe a team in the Big Ten. Give me a team or two that you think is a little bit undervalued through 3 weeks.
Yeah, I would say right now, I'm looking at this week's AP poll. Oregon's at 13. I've got Oregon number 8. I think they're at 13, they're vastly underrated. They play Colorado this week. I think, Colorado comes down to earth this week. I think Oregon's somebody, and then Oregon State, they're ranked 16th in the AP poll. I've got Oregon State at 11. People don't know much about Oregon State. It's unfortunate with conference realignment. They're in a bad situation. I think Jonathan Smith, I don't think he's one of the most underrated coaches in the country. I think he's the most underrated coach in the country. And anybody that saw the Vegas Bowl last year, they just basically seal clubbed Florida. And I saw him in May in Arizona at some Pac-12 meetings, and I went up to him and I'm like, how could you do that? How could you do that? And he's like, what are you talking about? And I go, the audacity of you doing that. I don't understand it. He goes, Brett, what are you talking about? I said, how could you let Florida kick that last second field goal? So he had a good laugh about that. But look, I think they're really good. And that's what's unfortunate with, the situation with the Pac-12 is you have 8 teams right now that are ranked in the top 25. That is absolutely crazy. 75% of your membership, at least for this year, is in the top 25. Now, when we get to the end of the year, they're going to beat each other up. Some of those guys are going to move out. But I think Oregon's really good. I know, you said somebody in the 10 to 20 range, but I think, Washington's up there, sniffing around the top. They're at number 8 in the poll. I've got them at number 5. I guess I must be overranking every Pac-12 team because that's how good I really think they are. USC's at 5. I've got them down at 7. I think they've got issues defensively. That's why I don't have them higher. But Michael Penix, you're talking about, your Florida podcast. People may or may not remember this. Tampa Bay Tech. Yeah, Tampa Bay Tech, recruited by Tom Allen, who used to coach at Temple Heights, which no longer exists anymore. And he got him to Indiana, and now he's at Washington. If Washington runs a table, they've got to get through the Pac-12. I think you'll see him in New York for the for the Heisman Trophy ceremony. So if the bottom line is, with so many good teams out there in the Pac-12, one of those guys has to get through the first week of December with only one loss. If they do, they'll be in the playoff. I'm afraid, though, they're probably going to beat each other up, and I don't know if anybody can survive that with less than 2 losses. And I didn't even mention Utah or UCLA. I mean, that conference is just so stacked right now.
No, you make a great point about the Pac-12. They're going to probably cannibalize themselves, and you just hope for the sport that one of these teams can get out of there with one loss, because it would be good to see. Because again, the Pac-12 hasn't been in the playoff in so long. It'd be good for the conference as the conference does come to an end. A couple more things, we'll get you out of here. Got a huge slate of games this week. We had a monster schedule. You mentioned obviously Alabama, Ole Miss. You got Colorado, Oregon, Florida State, Clemson, and then probably the showdown up in South Bend. You got the Irish and the Buckeyes. Give me a note or two about each of the, one of those games that you really think is going to be interesting as we get to. Obviously, Ohio State has not been to South Bend in many, many years. What do you think of that? Give me a thought on that game.
Well, I mean, it's basically, all the games you mentioned were, until we get to the 12-team playoff next year, and that can't come soon enough. These are people say they want an expanded playoff. Well, this week is your expanded playoff.
Yeah.
These are all quarterfinal games, because the loser is all, for all intents and purposes, is eliminated unless they run the table the rest of the way. Not saying they can't do that, but it's going to be very unlikely. And so, specifically, Ohio State is kind of an analogy I saw, which I kind of liked, is up to this point, it's kind of just played with its food. We don't really know how good they are.
Right.
And Notre Dame, NC State's a quality opponent, but before that, Navy has some issues. They played a FCS after that. We don't know how good Notre Dame is, and
Right.
Notre Dame wants to get in the mention for the playoff or a New Year's Six game. They need to win this game. They also have USC later on. So we'll have to see. Sam Hartman, people didn't see him play at Wake. He's at Notre Dame now. He's one of the top quarterbacks out there. Is an unbelievable talent. But is Ohio State just too talented for Notre Dame? We'll have to find out. But for local people here, if you follow my bowl projections at all, I've been putting Notre Dame in the ReliaQuest Bowl, and the ReliaQuest Bowl does not have any tie-in to the ACC, which Notre Dame's considered a part of, even though they're not a member. But there is a clause in there that if a Big Ten team goes to the Orange Bowl, then the ReliaQuest can get the first pick from the ACC. So if you want to see Notre Dame and Tampa, then you need to root for Ohio State to knock Notre Dame down a peg and get them some losses. And you need the Big Ten trio of Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State to keep winning. So one of those guys goes to the Orange Bowl. But if Notre Dame can win this game, then they are legit.
Great spot. They got a great
they
spot.
are legit contender. Yeah, I've got them, I think, 10 on my AP ballot. We just, again, it's so early in the year. We don't know much about a lot of these schools, but with all the 6 or 7 top 25 matchup this week, I think we'll get a good read on a lot of these guys.
And then Clemson, Florida State. Obviously, it's an elimination game for Clemson. If they lose a second time, they're in big, as far as a playoff berth, probably out. Florida State showed a little chink in the armor at Boston College over the weekend. Is this a good spot for Clemson to potentially pull the upset?
Well, it's basically do or die for Clemson. Dabo's going to play it up this week that, nobody's giving little old Clemson a shot, and no one thinks we can win. And, they'll feed into all that. For Florida State, it's simple. They knew coming into the season that they basically, not that they really had a 3-game schedule, but they knew they had they had LSU at Clemson, and then Miami, and then obviously Florida. So this is part 2 of that three-part big game for Florida State. And if they are going to get over the hump and finally become a national contender again, going back to the days when Jameis was there, they absolutely have to win this game. The good news for Florida State is even if they lose this game and then win out and then, win the ACC at 12-1, I think they would be in good shape as far as the playoff, because I think that LSU win is going to carry a lot of cachet down, as we get deeper into the season, as long as LSU continues to win. We saw what LSU did to Mississippi State last week. So LSU looks like they are legit. But for Florida State, this is more okay, if you want to prove that you guys have really taken that next step,
right,
you have to go in and you have to beat the team that's generally regarded as the best team year after year in the ACC. Although maybe that hasn't happened in the past year or two, but historically, you gotta kill the champion if you're gonna take over that role. So that's going to be a monster game to kick off our Saturday at noon. We can't wait to see it.
No, that's a great point. And last point, I'll get you out of here. Give me a thought on Miami. Obviously, Cristobal with a big win against A&M, especially obviously here in the state of Florida. There's a lot of optimism. You mentioned the potential. Miami could come into that game undefeated against Florida State in about a month or so. Florida State could be in that game. Is that a potential? Do you like what Mario's doing down south?
Yeah, I mean you talked about the transfer portal. They brought in some offensive linemen, and the big difference for Miami this year is their offensive line has given Tyler Van Dyke time to actually throw the ball. And, that wasn't a fluke win against Texas A&M. They beat him. They beat him bad. And, we can joke about, Texas A&M and their issues on offense and Petrino coming in and taking over and what's going to happen there. But defensively, A&M has always been really, really, really good there.
Yep.
And for Miami to almost put up half 100, that was so, so impressive. And, again, they've taken advantage of the transfer portal. The biggest thing for them is their yards per play against against A&M was the best that they've had in a game against a Power 5 opponent in something like 10 years.
Wow.
So, they're just being more explosive on offense. They've got, they at Temple, Georgia Tech, they should be fine there. And then they get, consecutive weeks in mid-October at North Carolina, who they're going to put up a ton of points.
Yep.
And Clemson at home the following week. That would be huge. And if they can survive that, then wow, the showdown in November at Florida State, it'll be like the 1980s. Just waiting to see who misses a field goal at the buzzer. But yeah, that would be great for the state and also nationally for people that, because this, quite frankly, that, people that have grown up around here that know the history of Florida State, Miami, we know what that rivalry is and what it's about. But for younger folks, they probably have no clue what it's like. And so that would be really cool if both Miami and Florida State came into that game, top 15 or even top 10 in the country. That would be unbelievable.
Well, Brett McMurphy, I really appreciate the time. Again, follow Brett's work on Twitter and X at Brett_McMurphy. Brett is the college football insider with the Action Network, breaks all huge stories all year long. He's very dialed in as far as the realignment talk of what's going on as far as moving forward. And again, all these week to week, man, Brett is the ultimate insider in the college football world. So, Brett, I really appreciate the time.
Hey, thanks, Jason. Appreciate it.
You got it. We'll be right back.